Flames clawed at the night sky, turning my quiet farmhouse into a blazing inferno. The air snapped with heat, embers swirling upward like crazed fireflies, and there she stood, my tormentor, Susan Reynolds, watching with wide, panic-stricken eyes as my home burned. This was the same woman who'd spent months trying to drive me out of this town, the same one who'd schemed, harassed, and lied. But now, she looked more terrified than I was. Because standing next to her, staring at her in utter disbelief, was my husband, Matt Grayson, the fire chief, and he'd just pieced together what she'd done. 2 months ago, I'd moved into this farmhouse, eager for a new beginning. I'd pictured waking up to crisp air, the crow of roosters, and a simple, peaceful life. Instead, I got Susan, the self-appointed ruler of this little town, who treated the neighborhood like her personal fiefdom. It started small, a smirk whenever I passed her house, a snide remark about my quaint little place. Then came the not-so-subtle digs. "You must be new to rural living," she'd said one day, eyeing me as I unloaded groceries. "This town has standards, hon. Not everyone's cut out for it." I'd flashed a tight smile. "Good thing I don't need your approval." She didn't take that well. The trouble escalated fast. First, a call to animal control because my rooster crowed too early. Then a complaint to the town council about my fence ruining her view. She even had the gall to report my barbecue smoke to Matt's fire department, claiming it was a hazard. I laughed when he told me, "Doesn't she know you're the fire chief?" I'd asked, grinning. Matt just shook his head. "Some folks think they're above the rules, Sarah. She's one of them." Susan was that type, all right. Then she got gutsy. One morning, my mailbox was smashed. A few days later, my truck's tires were slashed. Susan played innocent, of course, with that fake, syrupy smile. "Oh, how awful," she'd gasped. "Crime's really picking up around here, isn't it?" She was toying with me, and I started giving it right back. When she threw a loud garden party and forgot to invite me, I cranked my speakers and blasted barnyard noises over the fence. When she blocked my driveway with her oversized SUV, I borrowed a buddy's tractor and parked it behind her car for half a day. But Susan didn't just want to irritate me. She wanted me gone. The breaking point came when she strutted onto my property, arms crossed, her pristine jacket so stiff it could have sliced bread. "I've made a generous offer to the county to buy this land," she announced, like I'd be impressed. "It's wasted on you." I crossed my arms. "I'm not selling, Susan." Her face hardened. "You might want to rethink that." "Or what?" I tilted my head. "You gonna tell the mayor my chickens cluck too loud?" Her lips thinned. "It's a small town, Sarah. People know who fits here and who doesn't." I smiled sweetly. "Funny, my husband says the same. He's the fire chief, by the way." For a split second, she faltered, but then she spun around and marched off. That night, I set up security cameras. And that's when everything changed. I don't know what flipped in Susan's head, but a week later, she made the dumbest move of her life. It was a quiet evening. Matt was on night shift, and I was home alone, savoring the calm. Then I saw a weird glow outside. I stepped onto the back porch and stopped cold. Fire. It was small at first, licking the barn's base like a venomous snake, but the wind was rising. Panic hit me hard. I grabbed my phone, but before I could call, I saw her, Susan, skulking near the barn. I couldn't believe it. She was starting the fire. For a moment, my mind blanked. This woman was unhinged, but this was next level. Then, as if it finally hit her, Susan stepped back, her face ghostly in the firelight. The flames, bigger than she'd planned, were spreading fast. She turned to bolt, right into the flashing lights of Matt's fire truck. It all happened in a blur. The crew leaped into action, hosing down the blaze before it could devour the barn. Susan stood rooted as Matt climbed out, his eyes flicking from her to the fire to me. I'd never seen him so mad. "Susan," he said, his voice low and lethal. "What the hell did you do?" She stammered, shaking. It was an accident, I was." Matt turned to me, his face grim. "Did you see her do it?" I held up my phone, the security footage still rolling. "Yep. And so did my cameras." Susan let out a choked sob. "Wait. This isn't." Matt grabbed his radio. "Chief Grayson to dispatch. We've got an arson suspect in custody." Her face went white. "No, this is absurd." "I didn't mean," she didn't finish. The cops rolled up minutes later. Susan, the woman who'd hounded me for months, who'd called me unfit for this life, who thought she owned everything, was cuffed and shoved into a squad car. The town would buzz about this for decades. As the fire died out, Matt walked over and pulled me into a hug. "You okay?" I nodded. "Better than Susan." He chuckled darkly. "She really thought she'd get away with it." I smirked. "She also thought I didn't have cameras." Matt glanced at the police car. "She'll try to wiggle out of this, you know." I crossed my arms, watching Susan yell at the officers, her perfect hair a mess, her jacket smeared with ash. Let her try. The next morning, smoke still hung in the air. The fire hadn't done much damage, thanks to Matt's crew, but the charred barn wall and scorched grass left a sour taste. I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, staring at the mess. It was unreal. Susan had actually tried to torch my place. Not just another petty stunt, but arson. Now she was in a cell, probably still claiming it was all a mix-up. Matt had been up late with the police, handing over the footage. He was inside now, napping off the exhaustion. Me? I couldn't sit still. I kept seeing Susan's face twist in horror when the fire got out of hand. She hadn't meant to destroy everything, just scare me off. Too bad fire doesn't play by her rules. She'd learned that the hard way. I didn't pity her one bit. Around noon, tires crunched on my driveway. A shiny black car pulled up, and out stepped a woman in a tailored suit and heels too fancy for dirt. Her face had that same smug irritation I'd seen on Susan's too often. "Mrs. Grayson," she said, slamming the door. "I'm Diane Reynolds, Susan's sister." Of course she was. I sipped my coffee, not bothering to stand. Diane climbed the porch steps like she owned them, stopping by my chair. "I'm here about this ridiculous mess. My sister shouldn't be in jail over a silly accident." I raised an eyebrow. "A silly accident?" "She set my barn on fire." Diane waved it off. "It wasn't on purpose. Susan's careless sometimes, you know how it goes. But no real harm done." I set my mug down, temper flaring. "No harm? If that fire had reached my house, my animals, or if I'd been asleep inside, you wouldn't be here brushing it off. She could have killed someone." Diane's lips pursed, annoyed I wasn't buying her act. "Susan's been in this town forever. People respect her. If you push this, it'll ruin her." I gave a sharp laugh. "Her reputation's toast already, Diane. The whole town saw her get arrested. And my husband's the fire chief. This isn't disappearing." Her jaw tightened, but she forced a smile. "I was hoping we could settle this quietly." There it was, the Reynolds family fix, cash and control. I leaned back. "Let me guess, you want me to drop the charges for a nice payout?" She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "We could discuss compensation." I shook my head. "Not a chance." Her smile vanished. "You don't want to cross this family, Mrs. Grayson." I stood, meeting her stare. "Funny, I think your sister did that when she tried to burn my farm down." Diane huffed, fixing her sleeves. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said, brushing past her to open my door. "Susan did. And she's going to face it." She shot me a final glare before stomping back to her car. I watched her peel out, shaking my head at their nerve. Matt stepped onto the porch as the dust settled, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Let me guess, Reynolds family cleanup crew?" I sighed. "She tried to bribe me." He whistled low. "They don't give up, huh?" I grabbed my coffee. "Nope. But neither do I." That evening, I hit the general store for supplies. The second I walked in, whispers followed. The town was abuzz about Susan's arrest, and every eye locked on me. Sarah, Mrs. Jenkins, the old baker, shuffled over. "Is it true? Did Susan really try to burn your place down?" I nodded. "Yeah. Caught it on camera." She clucked her tongue. "That woman always thought she was untouchable." Not shocked, though. Another lady piped up. "Heard her sister's trying to fix it." "What are you going to do?" I set my basket down. "What anyone would. Let the law sort it." Some nodded, others murmured agreement. A few still seemed stunned. Susan had ruled this town for years, always dodging her messes. Not this time. As I left, I spotted Diane by an SUV, on her phone. She flashed a tight smile and climbed in. This wasn't over. Next morning, my phone woke me. It was the sheriff. "Sarah, you'd better come to the station." My stomach nodded. "What's up?" He paused. "Susan made bail." I shut my eyes, breathing deep. Of course she did. Her family's money at work. "What's that mean for the case?" "She's out, but not free," he said. Trial's still on. She won't go quietly, though. I gritted my teeth. She never does. I stared out at the sunrise, the damaged barn in view. Susan was loose, still a threat. She'd already screwed up big, and I was ready for whatever came next. The air in town felt different that day, heavier, charged. Susan on bail meant trouble brewing. I walked Main Street, ignoring the whispers. I didn't care about their gossip. I had bigger fish to fry. Matt had warned me to stay sharp. Susan might be down, but she wasn't out. She'd always bent people with threats or cash. Problem was, I didn't bend. I was in the feed store when I saw her. Susan, standing there in a too-tight coat, hair perfect, like she hadn't just tried to torch my life. Her eyes had a wild edge. She hadn't planned on getting caught, and now she was unraveling. She saw me and froze, then lifted her chin and marched over. I didn't budge. If she wanted to play dumb after this, I'd let her dig her hole. "Sarah," she said, voice silky. "I hear you've been busy spreading stories about me." I tilted my head. "You mean the truth?" "Yeah, keeps me occupied." Her smile tightened. "There's no proof I meant to start that fire." I crossed my arms. "You were on my land with matches." "What were you doing? Campfire sing-along." She gave a dry laugh. "You don't get it. This town knows me. You're the outsider. They might enjoy your drama now, but they'll pick me when it's over." I leaned in. "I don't need them to pick me. The law's already on it." Her eyes narrowed. "You could have let this go. Now you've cornered me." "You cornered yourself when you lit that fire," I said, unflinching. Her face twitched, fear behind the fury. She wanted control, but it was gone. She opened her mouth, then shut it and stormed out, heels clicking. I exhaled. She didn't scare me, but she was dangerous when desperate. That night, Matt came home early, tossing his keys down. Sheriff called. "Susan's lawyers are stalling the trial." I set my coffee aside. "Figures. She's scrambling." He nodded. "She's unpredictable now. Watch yourself, okay?" I smiled faintly. Always do. But I wasn't careful enough. At 2 a.m., a rustle woke me. Soft but off. I sat up, heart pounding. Matt slept beside me. Then I heard it again. A shadow crossed the porch. I slid out of bed, grabbed the bat by the door, and peeked out. My blood ran cold. Susan, near the barn, her face pale in the moonlight. Was she insane enough to try again? I didn't wait. I called the sheriff. "Susan's on my property," I hissed. "Come now." Then I stepped outside. "Susan." She froze, then bolted. I ran, barefoot, adrenaline pumping. I caught her at her car, grabbing her arm. "What the hell are you doing?" She yanked free, breathless. "You don't understand." "Understand what?" I snapped. "That you're unhinged." Her eyes darted. "I wasn't. I just needed to talk." I laughed bitterly. "You don't sneak around at night to talk." "I need you to drop the charges," she rasped. "If I'm convicted, I lose everything. My house, my name." "You lost that when you torched my farm." I cut in. Her face twisted. "You don't belong here. You think you've won, but—" Headlights flooded the drive, sheriff's car. Susan gasped, backing up. "No, you don't have to." I turned to the sheriff. "She's trespassing again." He sighed, unsurprised. "Susan, let's go." She shook her head, frantic, but the deputies cuffed her. As they led her away, she glared back, hollow-eyed. "This isn't over." "Yes, Susan," I said, steady, "it is." Matt joined me as the car drove off, rubbing his eyes. "Can't leave you alone for a minute." I exhaled, drained. "Keeps life exciting." He hugged me tight. "She's done. No more outs." I nodded, relaxing. It was over, the nightmare neighbor, the fire, the threats. Susan had lived like she was untouchable, above consequences. But entitlement only stretches so far before reality hits. And this time, it had crashed down hard.